involved with. But I'll also be talking about the animals themselves and the way to approach them, and also, I suppose, also looking at the issue of climate change and conservation, things like that. So we'll be moving around all kinds of things, but it's definitely a family show, and you'll go away. The emphasis is definitely on the photography and the cinematography.
Those wee bits at the end of the shows, Blue Planet or Planet Earth or whatever,
yeah,
they're my favorite. Well, that's, I was going to say they're my favorite bits of the show. Well, I enjoy the shows, but I really, really, I love the bits at the end as well, because you get a wee glimpse in behind. And I'm sort of now at the stage where I'm watching the shows and I'm going, I wonder which part will they pick out to feature at the end.
Well, I agree, and there are interesting stories about all kinds of parts, because the different kinds of photography that you'll see demand different skills. It's very different if you're filming a very small animal as opposed to something big, and then of course you've got underwater versus topside, things like that. So I do topside and I do underwater, and I do big animals, big charismatic animals like polar bears and killer whales, things like that. So I'll be pulling stories about them into my show. And sometimes, you might be surprised, an animal that you might think would be quite dangerous, let's say, is actually, once you get to know it, it can be, less dangerous than you think. But on the other hand, what can start off as a friendly encounter, if you don't read the animal correctly, then it may become a little bit more than you bargained for, put it that way. So I'll be talking about my time with polar bears, killer whales, animals like that, underwater and topside.
You didn't start out as a photographer. You started out as a diver. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That was my first real big interest, was diving. I got into that at school, and that took me in the direction of marine biology, where I did a degree. But by then, I sort of, what I wanted to do was, I loved the adventure side of diving, but I appreciated knowing about science. So I began to look for expeditions where I could work underwater and with biologists, and that led me to the big break in a way, was going to the Antarctic. I went to the Antarctic way back in 1976. And I worked as a scientific diver and as a biologist, so I was looking after the diving equipment on the base, and we dived all year round out of boats in the summer, but then underneath the ice in the winter. And of course, the opportunities for photography were just amazing down in the Antarctic. If you want somewhere to get a handle on photography that's not too difficult, to be honest, go to the Antarctic, because the animals there's no polar bears in the Antarctic, so the penguins, the seals, and the birds and things are much easier to approach. So anyway, that was when I got into photography. But then, I did one winter, then I did 2 winters in the Antarctic. And my next big stroke of luck was meeting David Attenborough, meeting the great man in the Antarctic. He was down with a small film crew, and they were on a ship, and they asked if they could come on to our base for a couple of days just to do some filming. So I helped them over those 2 days, and it was really quite simple. By the time I finished those 2 days, I was talking to the camera person that was with David, and I was thinking, what a job this man has. He's doing all the things that I like doing. He did a bit of diving, he was working with animals, working with a small crew like David, and doing something that felt very worthwhile. And it was just also downright, glamorous, if I could call it that. These guys were going from the Antarctic. They weren't going back to UK. After they came out of the Antarctic, they were going to go to Galapagos for 3 weeks and then on to somewhere else. So I began to think, how can I get into that field? And David and the others, they were very helpful with their advice, and they also implied that the knowledge that I had working in the Antarctic, knowing the cold, knowing the animals, that was pretty useful. They hadn't met anyone who had that sort of background. There were plenty of people they knew who knew all about Africa and African wildlife, but I was the first person who knows something about the Antarctic. So I decided when I started that I would play to my strengths and I got the chance to winter with to overwinter with some emperor penguins. And the footage that I brought back with that, along with some other stuff that I was asked to get, that set me off on the right track. And in a way, I've played to my strengths, but that's why I've done a disproportionate amount of cold filming as opposed to jungles or coral reefs. So it's been a very interesting 35-year career that I've had visiting the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Well, it's been very interesting as well, sort of this side of the TV screen, watching what you film and watching what's produced. And you've worked on the really big ones, the ones that we're sort of all familiar with, Blue Planet, Planet Earth, the Frozen Planet. And from those little bits that we see at the end about how certain segments are made, there just seems to be a lot of waiting and a lot of discomfort. And in maybe very cold environments. It's either very cold or very hot. And then you're out there for weeks or months at a time. So you need to be cut out for it, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, you need to be. It's funny, people often say you must be very patient. But in a way, that's why people are employing you. They're employing you for your patience, but also for that sort of tenacity, which is almost like patience with a purpose. You really have to. You want to get your teeth into the sequence, into the behaviour that you want to see. You really, you've got to feel this drive to bring back the images. And of course, there's a big team of researchers and producers who've done a lot of work to ensure that you're in the best place at the best time, so that you have the best chance to film it. And sometimes it is remarkably simple. We just have to be there and be ready to film. And as you pointed out, there is an element of discomfort in a lot of natural environments. There aren't many places in the world which are easy all the time. I mean, you come to Ireland in August and you're out on the marshes or the moors, you're going to get eaten alive by midges and things like that. You go to the jungle and it's going to be humid. The fungus is going to start growing over the inside of your lenses. There are leeches, there are mosquitoes, all that sort of stuff. On the other hand, cold places, they are cold, but with the right preparation of the equipment and the right clothing, you can learn to cope with the cold. And actually, the environment itself is very healthy, very clean. There's no bugs out there. If you're going to get a cold, or your most likely time to get a cold is when you're coming back from the Arctic or the Antarctic. That's when you fall prey to the normal sort of bugs like flu and stuff like that, and you pick it up on the plane on your way back to civilization, because the time that you've spent in the Antarctic or the Arctic, it's so clean, you just lose all your natural resistance to these bugs in a way. So I've chosen to take on the cold as my challenge, and other people, they prefer, as I say, the jungles or the deserts or some other extreme environment. But I just love the wilderness of the poles. I love the emptiness. I love those 180-degree skies that are above you. I love the fact that I've had the chance to spend a lot of time and try to film polar bears where you can't hide from a polar bear. If you can see a polar bear, the polar bear can see you, and the polar bear can smell you a lot further away than it can see you. And the fact that you're on a one-to-one with this top charismatic predator in the world, the fact that you're out there sharing the environment with it, out on the sea ice, it's just a wonderful sense of privilege that you get when you spend time with these animals and watch them behaving, hunting the seals or out with their cubs, all this sort of stuff. It's just a lovely, lovely place to be.
Speaking of top predators, there was a fantastic sequence a couple of weeks ago in Frozen Planet, and this is where you filmed killer whales, and there was seals up on the ice, and the whales have worked out a method where they can wash them off the ice into the water so they can get at them. And it was absolutely stunning. It must give you great satisfaction when you're able to film something like that for the first time, or maybe film other animal behaviour that you know just hasn't been done before?
Well, that's the holy grail, really, isn't it? Is to get onto a piece of behaviour which hasn't seen before. And I've been fortunate to done a few things like that. And two of them, in fact, did involve killer whales for Blue Planet. Myself and Tom Fitz, we filmed killer whales attacking a grey whale for the first time. And then later on, myself and Doug Anderson, we did that behaviour with the killer whales, making the wave to wash the seals off the ice floe. And that is, I mean, it's a remarkable piece of behaviour. When you think of all the coordination and communication and intelligence that needs to be in those animals in order to do something as complicated as that, with the different roles that they play. You know, some are making the waves, some are in the water ready to grab the seal, and then when it's in the water, they've got different ways of disabling the seal, you know, making big beats with a fin or blowing bubbles, etc. So it's very exciting, you know, when you see a piece of behaviour like that for the first time, and when you've got the chance to capture all the elements of the behaviour, let's say. But that's the advantage of working for big, ambitious series. Those series are expensive to make. You need to be out there in the field for a long time, because you can't guarantee how long it's going to take you to see that piece of behaviour. Sometimes you go out with the best will in the world, and the weather and the animals, they just don't cooperate, and you may come back with nothing. But as long as you've been there, as long as you've been out there, as long as you've been ready, that's in a way as much as you can do. But yes, it's the idea of bringing back something which no one has seen before, the idea that you are there witnessing it for yourself. That is a hugely satisfying, and I'll be talking about examples of that in my talk. You know, watching polar bears coming out of their den, for example, or underwater seeing things that no other people have seen. It's a great way to make a living.
It sounds like it, all right. And if people want an insight and want to find out a bit more, well, you're on tour. I know it starts tonight in Sligo, continues in Dublin tomorrow night, and here in Letterkenny and in Greenland Theatre this Thursday night. Details about ticket availability from the box office. Doug Allan, thank you very much for chatting with us on the show, and the best luck with the tour.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks very much. I'm looking forward to coming to Letterkenny.
Keep your ears peeled to Highland Radio. We're giving away... Sorry, we're not telling you yet. Yes, you heard right. It's a secret. But stay tuned to the 9 to Noon show for more details.
There's always a buzz in Dublin, but there's something extra special about Dublin at winter time. Experience a whole lot of live entertainment this November. From buskers and bands to theatre